To begin, you want to start by downloading image 1, the plate. Make sure that you are hitting the download icon at the top right-hand corner and downloading the image and dragging it down to Photoshop and dropping it down into an empty workspace. Next, you want to go over and download image 2, the bread. Again, download, click, drag, drop. From here, we want to make sure that we make the piece of bread large enough. So while it's in transform mode here already, I'm going to go ahead and push shift and hold shift down on my keyboard and drag the bread to be more of a realistic size to the plate. What shift does when you hold it down is it prevents it from becoming disproportionate. So shift locks it in. You see if I push shift, kind of locks it into the correct proportions. So shift does that. So you want to get in the habit when you are transforming and scaling images that you hold down shift. Next, I need to get rid of this white background on the bread. So I'm going to, before I do that, you want to right click and rasterize your image. And here's why. If I were to go over to my magic wand, which is the fourth tool down on my toolbar, and you go to click, and I want to hit the delete key on my keyboard, the actual delete button, it says cannot complete your request because the smart object is not directly editable. So you have to right click, rasterize the layer. Once you right click, you have to always click kind of around the words of the layer for it to work. Once you rasterize it, it lets Photoshop know that you're going to be editing it. So when I go and hit delete on my keyboard, you'll see that it deletes those white pixels that I had selected. So I'm going to go ahead and deselect. So I'm going to go up to select, deselect, or Control D, or sometimes you can just click again with your selection tool, and that usually works. So I'm going to move on. And next I'm going to download image 3, the lettuce. Again, I'm going to push shift and size up this image. Once it's sized correctly, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And again, with my magic wand, I want to select. With this, you'll notice there are darker valued parts of the background that I need to hold shift to add to my selection. So you want to make sure that all that white background is selected. From here, I need to make sure that I rasterize my image. Okay, hit delete. Again, click to deselect or Control D, and we're ready to move on to our next image. All right, image 4 is an image of turkey. So again, download, drag, drop. I'm going to push down shift again and scale the turkey to be a little bit larger. Hit enter. I'm going to go ahead and rasterize my turkey slice. Right click, rasterize layer. Magic wand is still selected. Click, delete. All right, so now I want to quickly talk about the tolerance again on the magic wand. So you'll see here on the turkey slice, I have a little bit of that white kind of going around. So I'm going to go ahead and step backwards, Control Z, Control Alt Z. So make sure that you hit Control Alt Z to step backward, or you should have up here by the color swatches the history panel, and it looks like this. If you don't see this here, you need to go up to Window and select history, and it'll pull this up. So this is my history panel, and I can kind of go back in history. Notice how you can only go back so far. So that's really important. You can only go back about 12 spaces. So more than that, it won't save everything. So anyway, this is the history panel. So I wanted to show you guys that. Next, I want to adjust my tolerance of my magic wand to say 100. So that way when I select this white background, it's going to be a little less picky. And when I delete it, it doesn't have that like white, almost halo effect. So a higher tolerance of around 100 will make it have a nice clean selection. All right, next I want to show you how to warp images. So I'm going to put this in transform mode, Control T. And let's say I want to like fold my turkey slice, like sometimes that you do when you make a sandwich. If it is in transform mode and I right click with my mouse, it will bring up other transform options. So let's say I want to fold it. So I'm going to select warp. And when that comes up, a grid goes over the image, and I'm going to click these points on the right and fold them over. When you do this, anytime you go to transform and warp, you want to make sure that nothing is selected because it won't work correctly. So I'm going to hit enter, and you'll see that it looks like it is folded. So move on. I'm going to go ahead and make copies of this. So on our layers panel, if I right click, I want to hit duplicate layer, and it's going to make a copy of that layer. With my move tool selected, I'm going to go ahead and move that over. Let's say I want 3 slices of turkey, like so. All right, so next, let's move on to image 5, which is a slice of cheese. I'm going to download, drag and drop, hold shift to size it up, enter, go over to the layer, right click and rasterize, and then select my magic wand again. Okay, so another thing that is new with the magic wand, you'll see these little check boxes for different things, okay? Most likely you have anti-alias selected and contiguous. And I'm gonna actually turn my tolerance down to 30. So what I wanna show you is what this contiguous setting is all about. So basically, with it checked, which yours is probably checked, normally you have to, when you select a color, you hold shift to select any colors that are not touching that same color. And that can get a little tedious, especially with something like this. But if you uncheck contiguous, what it does is if I click on this white value, it's going to select all the white values in the picture, which can be helpful. Other times it is not helpful. So it can be good in this case. So with contiguous unchecked, it'll select all the white now. I have to go in and get all the holes in the Swiss cheese. So I'm going to go ahead and hit delete. Click to deselect. And I'm going to go ahead and check contiguous again because I want this is default. I want to keep it that way because it will probably mess you up later if it is unchecked. All right, so another thing about the history panel or the layer panel is you have opacity settings, fill settings, and then you have these different locks. You can lock images if you don't want them to move around. Basically, that's what these are. This is a general lock, this is a move lock, this is a lock to prevent you from painting on it, and so on. So these can become helpful later on. The opacity layer, if I were to turn this down, you'll notice that a lower opacity makes your layer more translucent, or it starts to disappear. So let's pretend that this piece of cheese is sliced super thin, so it's going to be a little see-through. So I'm going to set my opacity to 90%. Okay. Fill does the same thing. It's just basically opacity. So if it has a lower fill, it's not going to fill the image fully. So it's basically the same thing in this case. So All right. So usually on a sandwich you put condiments like ketchup or mustard or mayonnaise, so let's do that. So in Photoshop, you always kind of want to avoid painting on images. So what I want to do is I want to create a new layer. So down here on the layers panel, you have these different buttons. We've been using the hue saturation a lot, so these are our adjustment layers. But I actually want to use, I want to add a new blank layer that I can paint on. And that's what this little page turning icon is. So I'm going to click that button, and you'll see on our layers panel that this layer 1 popped up. I'm going to go ahead and title the layer 1 by double clicking the text, AL. Okay. I'm going to grab my paintbrush over here on my toolbar. Go ahead and set your, up here, go ahead and set your brush size to about 50 pixels. Here the hardness is how hard and soft the brush is. Like here's a super soft brush. It looks very blurry on the edges. You want to have, because mayonnaise isn't like super hard edge, let's say about 90%. And if I go to paint, notice how it's all black. So I'm going to step backward, Control Alt Z. I want to make sure that my paintbrush is painting white. So you notice I was painting black. So down here is the color of your paintbrush. I'm going to double click that, and I have my color picker, which wherever you click, it selects that color here. So I'm going to have like a white color. And I'm going to go ahead and paint on some mayonnaise. Okay. So here these little eyeball icons turn layers on and off temporarily. So you can see I did not paint all over the cheese or anything. So that's the thing. So I'm going to put my mayonnaise in between my cheese and my turkey. You can actually drag layers on this layer panel. So that's a good thing to know in case you want to rearrange the visibility. All right, let's make another layer. So new layer button, title it mustard, and drag that guy on top. So you should see it highlight. So let's make the color of a paintbrush almost like a darker yellow. So around here, hit OK. And again, I'll paint like a little squiggly. And another thing I want to show you about the layers panel is the FX button. So these are your layer effects. So if you click FX, go to bevel and emboss, and I'll show you a nice fun trick to make paint and other things kind of almost look 3D-ish. So bevel and emboss has different layer styles depending on what you want to do. So you can kind of mess around with those. But let's go ahead and do outer bevel, adjust the depth and the size, make it a little higher, soften, maybe chisel hard. So set this to be let's try inner bevel. That one looks pretty good. So you can see these do all kinds of different things. So I'm going to soften it up a little bit. Down here is the shading. I feel like those dark shadows are too much. So I'm actually going to bring the opacity of this black down so it's not so harsh on the eyes. Okay, you kind of adjust it to where it kind of resembles mustard. Kind of like a fun little trick. So that's bevel and emboss, and you can see there's all kinds of different layer styles. So you can kind of mess down with those. We'll be using a few like drop shadow later in the course, and I'll show you what those are all about. But this is bevel and emboss. So set these settings to what you think looks good. Hit OK. And that's all the ingredients that we're going to put on here. So I'm going to go ahead and put another piece of bread on top to finish my sandwich. So I'm going to go down to my wheat bread, right click, duplicate layer, hit OK, and then drag that piece of bread all the way on top, like so. So now it looks like it is a finished sandwich. So at this point, go ahead and go to File, Save As, and you want to make sure that you save to your U drive. Hopefully yours is going quicker than mine, because oftentimes, if the internet slows down, the U drive doesn't respond as quickly. Let's see, close these out. Here we go. Okay. So again, computer, go to U drive, and I really hope you have like an intro to digital art folder at this point. Go ahead and title this maybe Photoshop sandwich, and then save that in your intro to digital art folder. Okay. Save. All right, so from here, go ahead and turn it into Classroom, and I will be looking at the grading rubric according to what this is.